Hi, my name is Ashley Lee. My project is on 3D printing, and I will be discussing what 3D printing is and what some of the uses are. A lot of people have the impression that 3D printing is mostly just making prototypes, and through a lot of my research and reading, I found out that it's actually not the case, not even close. But I even was under the impression that that's something that was the most common thing. Um, so let's start with where it all started. And it started by this man right here, Chuck Hull. He invented the first SLA printer in 1986, and it was the first to be patented. And he also said that he had no idea that these changes were going to basically change like the future and innovation and the way that 3D printing would have an effect on the world. So 5 great reasons why 3D printing is beneficial. 3D printing machines cost less than all the costs involved in manufacturing. So there's a lot of setup costs, there's buildings and machines and all of that, and 3D printing pretty much takes away all of that. And so you're just paying for the machine, and it does the manufacturing right there in that machine. So costs are significantly lower. Okay, so it also can print extremely intricate and delicate designs that previously manufacturing would say that they couldn't do. Did you pause it? There's also limited waste with 3D printing. It's called additive manufacturing, so they're adding material rather than starting with a block of material and removing it, so there's significantly less waste. There are multiple parts sometimes in machines that can be costly to replace, especially if you're constantly having to replace 1 or 2 of maybe 3 pieces. 3D printing has allowed it to condense 3 pieces into 1 piece. So that way, if, say, a tractor, rather than having 3 different pieces that go into an engine, they can consolidate it into 1. It also allows for customization on a massive scale. So things that are in a manufacturing business, it takes a lot to create different pieces to be able to inject those molds, and it's costly. While 3D printing, it's very easy to change designs or customize specific orders for each one of their customers. So popular among private users and small users, small business owners, are fidget toys and articulating toys. So articulating toys, they're able to flex, they're able to move, they have almost like joints. And these joints, they're printed that way. So when you pull it off of the mat, it's already able to move and flex. There's no gluing, there's no assembly, it's already done. So also 3D printing is really big in role-playing games. The role-playing industry is already really big as it is. So Pathfinder, D&D, Call of Cthulhu, a lot of those require like little miniature characters. So what's beneficial about 3D printing is people can either own a machine and create their own and print their own characters, or they can have someone else print them for them and send them to them. But each character can be very specific to what their character actually looks like for a better gameplay. I'm gonna have to watch it. So construction is actually something that I would have never associated 3D printing with. But according to Madeline P. from 3D Natives, she reports that the world's largest 3D printed building was just constructed. It was built on site in Saudi Arabia. You can see a picture here. I'll zoom in a little bit. It's 3 stories tall, and like I said, it's in Saudi Arabia, and the building materials cost less than 10,000 euros, which is incredibly affordable, and they were able to construct this building quite quickly, about a month's time. So 3D printing is also in the food industry. Some come from the medical field and some come from more of a entrepreneurial field. So like people who are caterers and private business owners. So one of the first things that I found out was that people who suffer from dysphagia, they can't swallow their food properly, so they have to have their food blended. Well, who wants their food blended and just mushed into a bowl? That's not fun. So someone actually created what's called a Foodini, and it is where you put your processed or pureed food into an injector, and then you put that into a machine and it pushes the food out, and as it's pushing the food out, it's making layers and making different designs. So say you have a mushroom puree, it can make mushroom shapes. If it's a chicken puree, they make like little 3D designs of chicken bones. So it's kind of cute. I think it makes eating fun, and they can go beyond just the medical field of people who are suffering from dysphagia. They can use it for young children who maybe are really hard to please with eating. So also the 3D printing industry, there's chocolate 3D printers. Who doesn't love chocolate? So you can print your own chocolate bust of Wolverine or the Hulk, anything that you really favor. You can find a file, upload it, and it'll start printing that shape right away. In the culinary field, some people are using 3D printing with the chocolate printers, just so they can have a really wow moment. They print pretty quickly. You have to be a little skilled at the timing because you want the chocolate to melt and harden at a specific time, but once they get it down right, it can look really amazing. And lastly, not least, with the printing of the food, there is a lady by the name of Elena Smirnova, excuse me. She does 3D treats and she prints desserts. So she uses a machine, she prints out dough and prints it in special shapes and stuff that are unique to her business, and she sells them. And in an interview, she said, "It took me a while to learn all of the tricks to getting printing results that I could present to my customers, and now I live in absolute harmony with my 3D printer." So she did struggle at first because with the 3D printer, the recipes weren't working out quite as right, and the consistencies just weren't quite even. So it took a lot of practice, but eventually she got there, and now she has a highly successful business due to 3D printing and making it work for her dessert company. And 3D printing is also making an impact in the hearing industry. So people who have hearing disabilities, they're starting to see the benefits of 3D printing. So Carlotta V reported 3D printing has advanced South African researchers to be able to complete a middle ear transplant. So what they mean by that is there are 3 tiny bones behind your eardrum, and they have found a way to 3D print those bones and transplant them into a patient's ear. And immediately after their surgery, they can hear. I mean, there is packing and stuff over their ear, so it's muffled, but as soon as that packing and everything comes off, they can hear no problem at all. So here you'll see how small these bones really are. Here is the malleus, incus, and stapes. So the 3D printing process has also changed how hearing aids are made. So before it was a very complex procedure. It took a long time. It took a long time for patients to get their hearing aids back, and when they did, they weren't that great sometimes. And it was a very difficult process. So 3D printing now has definitely made the process quicker and incredibly accurate. So there's fewer returns and issues. So there's a lot of different types of 3D printers. I'm going to go through this list right here, and then I'll follow by the printing materials, which it is a part of this, but I felt like they needed kind of their own separate space. So I'll go ahead and start with Sorry. We'll start with stereolithography, also called SLA. It can print fine details as small as 0.002 inches. That is tiny. Selective laser sintering, also called SLS, uses a nylon powder that turns to solid when heated. Polyjet printing prints flexible prototypes. It also can do more than just prototypes, but I think typically they are just prototypes. The inkjet 3D printer is not like a home printer, and I got confused because when I saw inkjet, I instantly thought of a printer that just prints on paper, and I'm like, how is that 3D? But this in particular is commonly used in electronics. So when you see the thin gold lines on those hard, like a motherboard or another piece of like internal electronic part, you'll see these thin lines. They almost look like a maze going around the board, connecting to all these other little pieces. That metal is what the inkjet printing is from. So then next we have electron beam melting. It melts powder in a vacuum sealed machine, and the machine is kept very hot at 1832 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is commonly used for orthopedics, and in aerospace. Laser metal deposition. Laser heats the metal material in a solid or powder state, and then it melts it, and it applies it in layers into the desired design. Then there's digital light processing. Some people call it DLP. It has a metal plate that moves into a vat of resin. So think of like a small tray. Some can do larger scales. There's a large tray or small tray, and the bottom of this tray has a clear window, and in the tray goes a liquid resin, and this metal plate comes down into the resin, and it goes down to the window plate, and a UV light from underneath flashes in the design that it needs to print for that first layer, and then that plate moves up and down to get new layers, and so the UV light hardens those layers into their appropriate place. Those are used in large and small businesses, and they even have like a desktop version, so something that can sit right on top. And the last type of 3D printing is fused deposition modeling, also called fused filament fabrication and fused deposition method. It feeds a spool of plastic thread from the top, and actually there's an image right here that shows it comes through the top and it goes through a heat nozzle which melts it, and then it starts printing back and forth, and the plate goes up and down also, and it prints into the shape, the desired shape that you want. There are supports when printed for these that when removed you can melt them down and turn them back into the plastic spool, into the plastic thread, so that way you can reuse it, so you're not losing any material. So now we'll go down to the printing materials. There's resin, which comes in different hardness, flexibility, and different colors. There's plastic, which comes in assorted colors and color effects. So if you ever look at, I believe I added a YouTube link on here that it once you look it up, you can watch videos of how that looks. Some of the designs and some of the effects with the colors are pretty cool. There's also different plastics that you can use. With metal, there's anywhere from aluminum to tungsten, and there's really many different types of metal that you can use for printing. There's also ceramic, which has different elements to choose from. And then other printing materials include food, concrete, or clay. And then 3D for printing for small businesses. People, 3D printing. So people are 3D printing right from their home. Some people do it for private use, and there's other people who are using it to make a profit. And one of the reasons why it is so profitable is because the desktop versions, which, like I said, there's many different sizes of desktop versions, and they're very affordable. So they fit in small places. You can have an office full of them, and they are a low cost, but also the materials that you're using to print with are also a low cost. So you have a higher profit margin. So, how large is the printing industry? I was actually quite shocked with how large the printing industry is. According to Grandview Research, the global market is expected to reach $16.75 billion this year. Last year, it was estimated at $13.84 billion, which is a $3 billion growth within just 1 year. And in 2028, it is projected that we will be at a market growth of $76.17 billion. So as you can see, 3D printing is highly versatile, profitable, and evolving. The possibilities are truly endless. And thank you so much for sitting through a very long presentation with me.